always remember that God's will, what he provided man when he created him, was free will. But God's will is free. There's no charge to be in God's will. That's true free will. Of course, he wanted his creation to do the right thing and act morally and with good conscience and be in harmony with him, which would be to be good. But unfortunately, when man wants to do his own will, that's why when you write your own will, that one will cost you, because there's huge amount of monetary cost involved in a man who would have a will, because he's usually leaving possessions behind that he thinks somehow in his mind that he can take with him, though he can't, and he's making all the workings with the devil's advocates to make sure that that his legal greed and mammon is going to wherever he wants to dispose on after his death. So God's will is the free will. Unfortunately, man in the legal is very willful, doing bad things. So we never want to be willful. We are in God's will, so we do his will. The word that comes up here is man involved with the legal system, the world that even surrounded Jesus, as we mentioned earlier, basically requires people to enter into contracts with men. So I asked the question, are you working for legal persons? Well, then let's look at the words of Paul in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 23. He says, ye are bought with a price, talking about Christ purchasing you back into his kingdom from Adamic sin. Be not ye the servants of men. Now, I think that's pretty direct. He says, do not. The word not is a direction with not an option to be moonlighting partly in. So even though you may not know how to do that right now, it's because of the position you are moving around that legal title in an improper manner. You are basically only in confusion because of where you are at the moment. You're participating as a surety for a legal title right now. And you have to remember that there is an option not to be that surety and what would happen for not being that. So I'm going to go, what does the word, what is going on here when we're involved in being the servants of men? Well, we're going to come up with we're going to go right to the term idolater. There's so many scriptures that deal with warnings about to be abstained from anything to do with idols or idolatry. Idolater, the root meaning is hired servant wages, see larceny. Larceny, to rob, to plunder, a mercenary, a soldier, a robber, wages, pay, to possess, acquire. Does it sound like everything that possibly you may be in that you didn't realize? So that's what an idolater is. It's away from God, and that's why they need ID for idolaters. It's for that purpose. In fact, when you'll understand the clue and the power behind the original document your parents did, this cannot be used for ID because it's not. So certainly they would say you can't use this for identification if you're trying to identify with it because it's not meant for that. Remember, this is a prohibition document, not a go-ahead document to use the title. They drew the line on what was theirs and what was basically yours. Now, when we go to basically further on this, we're going to look deep because the word idolater relates also to the word hireling that is defined in Samuel Johnson's dictionary 1755 to be a prostitute, which would further lead us to why is there so much counsel in the book of Proverbs for someone to avoid being with a prostitute. Okay, it's like a third party that could get involved in violating a marriage covenant, okay, or would make someone impure because of violating God's moral codes on how someone's to conduct themselves with the opposite sex. So the clear admonition here leads us to understand that the harlot of Revelation comes to mind on this, because if you're part of this prostitution of legal body sale for money, you're part of the satanic world that is doomed, according to Revelation, to come down. So are we, if we're involved in working in the legal system for any of their legal persons, whether it be the corporations or the legal body corpus of society in general, are we an idolater? I'd have to say yes is the word.